On the northern outskirts of Baltimore stood a house that looked like it had been cut out of an old engraving. A tall turret, pointed roofs, lancet windows, peeling turquoise paint. It was once the wealthy Victorian mansion of the Crow family, but it had stood empty for almost a century. Local children avoided it, saying that inside there was a ghost that called out your name. Last fall, this gloomy silhouette came to life. Antique collector Jonathan Reeves, well known among connoisseurs of rare items, bought the house. He wanted to open his own museum in this old house. He liked the idea of restoring something forgotten. A house with a legend is the perfect exhibit, he told his friends. However, the legend turned out to be much more real than anyone could have imagined. One day, Jonathan was busy moving, unloading boxes of belongings and antiques for the museum. Until late in the evening, every time he entered the house, he admired the carved railings, stained glass windows, and heavy doors. The house breathed history and something else. Closer to midnight, while on the second floor, he heard a strange sound, a scratching on the glass. The sound was as if a long fingernail was being run across an invisible window. "Probably mice," he whispered to himself. Following the sound, Jonathan entered a long corridor. The wall, which he remembered as completely bare that morning, was now adorned with a huge antique mirror in a black frame that looked as if it had been charred. He reached out and gently touched the frame around the mirror. The wood burned with cold, as if the mirror had just been taken out of ice water. Later, with a glass of wine by the fireplace, he tried to shake off his unease. However, the mirror drew him to it like a magnet. He went back into the hallway and froze. In the depths of the glass, the shadow of a woman in a long 1920s dress swayed. He turned around sharply. Nothing. Looking back, he saw only his own reflection and a smile he hadn't made. The night brought new horror. At exactly 3 o'clock, the house was filled with a quiet, almost affectionate whisper. "Help me!" The sound came from the mirror. Jonathan took out his phone to take a photo, but the camera refused to focus. The image seemed to dissolve. In the morning, he went to the city archives. An old newspaper from 1927 reported, "Margaret Crow disappeared on the night of November 5th. Neighbors heard a scream, but the doors and windows were locked. The next day, her husband Thomas disappeared. The only thing that interested the police was a massive Venetian mirror that Thomas had brought back from Europe." In the margins of the clipping, someone had written, "They say a mirror is a gateway between worlds. Those who gaze into its depths for too long remain there." The more Jonathan read, the more clearly he remembered yesterday's shadow. He returned home and continued unpacking boxes of belongings. In the evening, it began to rain, and the house took on a musty smell. When the clock struck midnight, the mirror fogged up as if a storm had begun inside. "Save! Free!" whispered a voice from deep within. "How?" Jonathan barely breathed. "Break the frame." He brought a hammer. However, at that very moment, the surface of the mirror darkened and revealed something else, his own silhouette. But his eyes burned with a cold light, and his lips stretched into a strange, snarling smile. Jonathan's hands dropped as if hypnotized. He dropped the hammer from his hands, unable to break the mirror. The night turned into an endless loop of sounds. It seemed as if someone was slowly climbing the stairs. Then a blue fire flared up in the fireplace. Jonathan heard his name being whispered. sometimes by a woman, sometimes by a man with a deep voice. He tried to go outside, but the front door was locked from the inside. In desperation, he returned to the mirror. This time, there was a couple standing there, a man and a woman in early 20th century clothing. The woman was reaching out to him while the man, his doppelganger, stood behind her shoulder with a predatory smile. There was a loud banging on the mirror as if someone was hitting the glass from the inside. Then the sounds got louder. In the morning, the neighbors called the police. They claimed that during the night they had heard the sound of breaking glass and loud cries from a man and a woman. When the police arrived, all the windows in the house and the mirror were intact. The house was empty, and the door was open, as if the house was inviting everyone to come in. The investigation has reached a dead end. Detectives wrote in their report, "The depth of the reflection is unnatural. It seems bottomless." The mirror emits cold. Instruments record a temperature drop to -5, although the temperature in the house is +20. Among the papers, they found Thomas Crow's old diary. The last entry read, "Margaret is now in this mirror. I must follow her." The words seemed to echo Jonathan's fate. The house on the hill stands empty again. Sometimes its windows glow when cars drive by, even though there has been no electricity inside for a long time. Neighbors say that on quiet nights you can hear a loud sound, the scratching of a fingernail on glass, and sometimes a double whisper comes from this house, a woman's and a man's, merging into one cold voice. The story has no end. The mirror is just waiting for a new gaze to open the way for another soul. Perhaps it will be you, lingering in front of the antique shop window in the evening. In one of the mirrors, you will meet the gaze of a woman or a man who did not manage to escape. Will you take a step closer or walk by? The decision is yours. However, the mirror is patienta. It knows how to wait.